Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of I Only Ask Because. I'm your host Tony, my co-host Dr. E, and what's today's topic?
Today, I kind of want to talk about whether or not it is celebrities' responsibility to carry an entire cultural struggle on their back. And I only ask because recently we've been hearing about a controversy with Snoop Dogg and Nelly and the young lady, that Tabitha Brown, who has items in Target for sale. And there's just an internal conversation about whether or not, as a community, since Target got rid of their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, should people who are impacted by that stop shopping at Target? If we stop shopping at Target, then will that negatively impact Tabitha Brown and her goods there? Obviously, it would if you're not buying them there. She does have goods for sale in other places and, of course, online. But again, the conversation is revolving around that. When it comes back to Snoop Dogg in particular, and him performing at an inaugural event, does that mean that as a late term baby boomer, I should stop banging Snoop Dogg when I'm in the car or whatever? like, um, anyway, I kind of want to talk about that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Let me tell you something. I'm so tired of hearing people complaining about this DEI. It's ridiculous. First and foremost. Secondly, the only reason people are actually up in arms about it is because Trump's in the White House. That's all it is. Because that's all he got to say. And it's really annoying that, first of all, to go back to the inauguration, even Snoop told himself back in 2017 to his 2025 self that he was a slave for going to that inauguration. So, I mean, go ahead. He's staying on his own business. His past self was compared to today. So, I mean, it shouldn't be, I think, on a celebrity to put the culture necessarily on their back, but it is. You do have to hold yourself to a higher standard, I think. But that shouldn't mean that the rest of us shouldn't also hold ourselves to a higher standard as well. So, again, in terms of I think I'm not going to shop any differently because a company kind of took themselves out of that situation because we know who the president is now. Just like Zuckerberg and all these people who were basically all for this stuff until Trump was in office because they scared of him. That's all. I'm not holding anybody. I'm not holding Zuckerberg, Target, any of these people that are getting rid of the DEI policies. I'm not really worried about them, but I am going to stick with the people that are staying and buy them. Costco, Southwest, companies like that are like, we know what the ramifications could be, but we're still standing 10 toes down. So I have more respect for them, but I'm not necessarily going to, I guess, boycott a Target or boycott a Meta because they're scaredy cats. But you see who the big dog companies are that are like, bring it on.
I mean, I agree with that. I think it's important to, first of all, going back to what you were saying about DEI, I think just squabbling amongst ourselves is really not productive anyway. And having said that, if you want to get down to the letter of DEI and the initiatives, there people of color are not the ones who have gotten most benefits from DEI and affirmative action initiatives. It's actually been Caucasian women. So I just want to, I'm that fact person. Fact check me if you don't believe me, but I want to go ahead and put that out first. And the only reason that's important is because if that's the case, then why are we continuously talking about DEI and should we have it and shouldn't we have it? Should we be woke? Should we go to sleep? Like what, why are people using these terms as weapons? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what's happening. I'm not really sure. I mean, I've never lived in this type of society before. What we're witnessing now, but what I can say is, historically, we've been here and we've been places like this as a society before. So if we were able to get past, other things, when you talk about boycotting, for example, um, back in the 50s and 60s, late 50s, early 60s, during the civil rights movement, I will say during the Montgomery bus boycott
Mm.
specifically, when thousands upon thousands of black people decided if we have to be treated differently but pay the same amount to ride the bus, we just won't ride the bus. Now you're talking about people who, not all of whom had transportation if they didn't ride the bus.
Mm.
And so as a community, what did we do? We carpooled and we walked ridiculous amounts of miles just to get to work and get back. We did what we had to do, but we stood together in solidarity. And as a result, the Montgomery bus system and basically the city, because the city actually was running the bus system,
Mm.
um, went ahead and conceded that, hey, maybe we should um, not have our buses segregated that way. And, we can point to a lot of different causes over the years and over the decades where people got together and said, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not going to shop here. We're not going to buy that. And so sometimes in 2025, I have to ask myself, just be honest, look in the mirror. Hey, how many miles would you have walked to get to work in the rain in your work shoes if you didn't, if you
Mm.
weren't able to ride the bus and you didn't have a car? So I'm saying all that to say everything is relative. It's the whining. It's the whining for
Yeah.
me. Like, okay,
Hmm.
if this is that messed up, then what is your role? We've talked about team sports before. What role can you play? I cannot write a $50 million check. Like, tell me who that was that wrote the $50 million check the um, to the opponent's campaign, but then turned around and had positive things to say about the new administration. I cannot remember who that was. I
Mm.
can never call his name, but he's like one of the big three or four, right? So it's not Zuckerberg. It wasn't.
Jeff Bezos.
It definitely wasn't him.
Oh.
I'm so sorry I brought that up. If I think of it during the time, time, I'll let you know. It was Gates, Bill Gates.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about
It
that.
was Bill Gates, yeah. And so I was really surprised to hear
That's
because
crazy.
at 50 mil, that's kind of a lot. Like, that's talking about putting your money where your mouth is. Well, as I mentioned, I can't write you a $50 million check.
Yeah.
But what I can do is try and stay positive and motivating and continue to fact check. So just, I'm trying to wrap this up, but recently, yesterday maybe, I happened to be online and I saw this breaking news where the Pittsburgh Steelers um, were happy to hear that some of the refs in the last Pittsburgh Steelers Buffalo Bills game were under investigation for their calls, for bad calls and everything. Now, you already know I'm not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or anything, but I love one. And so I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't think anything about it, Tony. I kept going. And then there were comments saying, well, somebody needs to look at those refs in the Chiefs game. And I was like, this is interesting. And then someone else put, oh, they've already done that. They have seven refs from the last Chiefs game under investigation. Kansas City Chiefs game under investigation. And I thought to myself, now that sounds kind of silly. So I'm sure that we all have heard of Snopes by now, right? And I was curious. Sometimes if I have time, I'll go to different, news outlets and everything, but I kind of didn't.
Mhm.
So I just went ahead and fact checked through Snopes, and lo and behold, that was a false story. So now I know I said I didn't have time, but I made time. So now I'm like, I wonder if the Steelers story is false too. That was a false story. Why does any of this matter? We have communities upon communities upon communities that wake up every day and get their news sources from false sources.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry it took me to be today years old to figure out that that's at the root of so much of our disagreement and our apparent disdain for one another, is that some of us are just flat out being lied to, or I should say, at certain points, all of us are flat out being lied to. And some of us are not willing or able or aware enough to do the work to find out that's what's happening.
And I think that's it's funny you brought the kind of the refs, the games and all that involved in it. Kind of brought it together because I do think there is an equilibrium, and this might be me just playing devil's advocate, but when it comes to the whole ref situation, if you have a bunch of calls that are like if it would have been 5 touchdowns that you got cheated out of, that's one thing. If you're getting calls for 15 yards here, 15 yards there, you might just think, you know what, y'all could have played a better game. But also, all it takes is one of those plays to maybe mess up an entire game. So I think at the same time as Americans, and we shouldn't have to put ourselves through this, but we have to work harder to get less misinformation, if that makes sense. And that does involve you kind of a lot of the times having to sit down and say, you know what, I was wrong about this. What else could I be wrong about? I know that this place, I don't like what they have to say, but a lot of the times they're right when they say things. So maybe I need to start listening more to them instead of being in my little bubble. So that kind of, it's just, it really makes me upset when I see so many people in the comments on Instagram, in the comments on Facebook, because like you said, this is when you'll be doing stuff a lot longer than you should because you're thinking, and you really shouldn't be, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all these people that are spewing this misinformation are absolutely correct because there are so many people liking this comment saying that DEI is the reason that an airplane went down or DEI is the reason that XYZ, your own president, saying this crazy stuff. So then you actually look deeper into it and you realize, oh, so these people are just spewing nonsense. And then everybody else who either doesn't have time, doesn't want to make time, or has time, but it's fitting their narrative. These people are the ones that are out here like, you know what? This says this. This is where I'm getting my information. So that must be the root cause. The president said that all of this is happening because too many women, too many minorities are in jobs that no one else really either wants to do or can do. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, well, since you got on that topic, I just want to take a moment to express my condolences for the employees and the families and friends of the employees
Yep.
from American Eagle Flight 5342, as well as our service people who lost their lives in the incident that you're referring to over the Potomac. Um, you may or may not remember this, but I actually um, some decades ago actually worked for the parent company, American Airlines, as a flight crew.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that even though I still have relatives in the industry, I cannot imagine anything more terrifying than waking up and hearing that any air disaster has occurred,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's everybody's worst nightmare.
That's right.
If you know or love someone in that industry, and or if you're a customer of that industry, and that doesn't leave a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
left after that. So, um, but comments like that are especially disturbing because I will tell you this. I did the math earlier today, and I have spent about two-thirds of my life kicking ass and taking names. There's not anything the president of anybody can say about me personally that I can take personally because I already know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I've done, I know what I've been through, etc. So I do take exception with people who have not had that experience or who do not know me very well and they can't even speak to that experience. I take exception to them making disparaging comments.
Yeah.
I'll just put
Yeah.
it out there. I think it would be as ridiculous as if I sat here and started saying, well, farmers from Texas in the 1950s who, on and on and on. Like, dude, I don't know. I don't know. And I haven't even read about it. But if I read about it, I still don't know if that's true. So if you are not big enough, man enough, woman enough, professional enough, sane enough to seek out people who you think you might have an issue with, then I don't know how much mental energy should even be expended toward you. Like, what do they call it? Living in somebody's mind rent free. you're not gonna be able to do that in mine. So I'm human, so just like everybody else, my knee jerk reaction initially is, wow, I cannot believe, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
especially when it hits as close to home as an industry where I know I've worked.
Yeah.
Um, it's just hard. I mean, I did read a statement, a post by I'll just say a local legislator that happened to have worked in aviation. And this is somebody I'm familiar with. He and I have talked about, his experience as a pilot and mine as a flight attendant for the same company, even though we never knew each other in that capacity. But he put the longest, most detailed post. Like he could have been interviewed on any of the news outlets and spoken very intelligently based on his 30 plus years in the industry, what more likely than not occurred for everything to happen. And as someone else, like I said, who worked in the industry, my curiosity got the best of me because knowing this person the way I do, the last thing I wanted to do was read some political nonsense, coattailing the current president on his, in my opinion, nonsensical comments.
Hmm.
Well, I was so happy and relieved to find out that this gentleman, there was nothing about politics in there anyway.
Hmm.
Anywhere. All he talked about was fact, 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 fact. Now, at the end of the day, is he the same person that I knew prior to reading that? Absolutely. But that lets me know that it is possible to step away from whatever your political leanings are, your cultural leanings, whatever you want to call it, and just have a sensible conversation with people.
Yeah.
Like, who can't do that?
And I'd hate to. I don't know this person personally, but it also kind of gets me. The more I think about it, it upsets me because I know so many people who are put in those situations where it's really just like a hierarchy of, I guess, your thoughts and what you find important. So a lot of people will say, "How could you bring politics? We're talking about children," and then when the tables are turned, when it comes to other children, all of a sudden they want to spew nonsense that has no factual basis to it. So that's one thing that I think you'll see a lot of, and really with any tragedy, I've noticed that over the years, if someone's close enough to it, like a pilot, and their president said some crazy stuff about him being a pilot, he'll probably say something. Now, he probably won't point out, oh, what the president said was nonsense, but he
Nope,
will
and he
say,
didn't.
we should all join hands and
Mm-hmm.
politics has no place here and
Mm-hmm.
XYZ. And the more you think about it, politics has very little place in our daily lives. And you see that with how we coexist as a nation. Everybody wants to get behind their keyboards and say this or talk to somebody they don't know and call them all sorts of names. But if you work with somebody who has similar beliefs, or if you live with somebody who has similar beliefs, you're not going to come at them any which way unless you're trying to have confrontation. And that's kind of what I think you'll see. You've seen it for decades, but you'll definitely see it more and more now whenever we have tragedies like this or things going on in the Middle East where people don't realize, or maybe they choose not to say they realize, how similar we really are in a lot of ways. So when we have tragedies happening at home, it shouldn't matter about DEI or about who the president is or about the gas prices. We should all be there for each other when certain things occur, especially something that is as life changing as that incident that happened over the Potomac. And again, I don't like picking on the president. He just makes it so easy. The fact that you had somebody who immediately went on social media instead of just getting down there as soon as possible, giving his condolences, talking about, well, this probably happened this because of DEI, because these people have no place here, and you filed bankruptcy 6 times. How many mistakes have you made? Crucial mistakes that have probably cost people jobs. Probably should have cost you being the president. You've made more mistakes than anybody, and when you have the chance to be the bigger person, the bigger man, time after time, you've shown that you're not capable of doing that. And that's why we have these issues in America, because at least half the country that went out and voted for this person despite him being exactly who he says he is, people are like, yeah, that's who I want to be my president. That's who I agree with. But again, when things are in your neck of the woods, oh, you know, we have drugs in my city and no one's doing anything about it. But then when you see drugs in urban cities or cities that don't necessarily look like you, all of a sudden they're animals, they're terrible people, what have you. So it makes me so upset because however often we talk about this, and so many people are missing the point that we should all be on the same team, we should all be on the same page, but we've proven as a society that we're not capable of doing that yet, and I don't know what the turning point would be where we can finally do that.
Well, this may be the turning point, because unfortunately, a lot of times things have to get really bad. I know the populations that I'm working with now, people coming out of recovery and trying to rebuild their lives and everything, that is a population that really does transcend race, creed, economic level, and certainly politics. And it's just, how can I say this? When people are trying to rebuild their lives, the term rock bottom comes up, right? Like sometimes people have to go back through, and not just recovery. When you talk about people, justice involved, they have to go back through the system a few times before it actually sticks. And they're like, okay, this isn't going to happen to me anymore. I've hit my rock bottom. Well, I think as a country, we are very, very rapidly approaching our rock bottom. And, so when you ask the question, what's it going to take? I think this is what it's going to take. Um, I wish this wasn't what it was going to take because this is going to hurt everybody.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt people based on, well, your economic level, yes, but if you can hear my voice, you're probably in the economic level that's going to be hurt by it.
Yeah.
Gender, uh, sexual preference, race, religion, there's not going to be a group other than the 1% that we've talked about. And we don't even know what's going to go on with them because, the fire, it's getting kind of close to the so-called allies and friends. But I just feel like it is going to take something that hurts almost everybody. Because right now, you have been so indoctrinated that when you hear my voice and when you hear the things I'm saying, a wall immediately goes up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
And so, unfortunately, I think it's going to have to be at your doorstep before you realize, OMG. And you probably won't say it because I know I'm embarrassed for you already. So I can imagine how embarrassed you're going to be when you realize that what's one of the things I saw recently? Oh, he's the I think they had one of his sons up there or something, and they were saying, oh, he's the second ass kicker in command or something like that. And I'm thinking, are you childish little itty bitty people really serious about something like that?
That's
Like,
wild.
I mean, it is wild. It's super wild. But again, it goes back to just living in this, like you always call it, a bubble, this me society, and even people who are not going off the rails. Recently, I guess you can tell I'm a little bit excited about football and everything, but that's a newer development in my life. I read something where someone was complaining about Kendrick Lamar being the headliner for Super Bowl, whichever one is coming up. And the comment that was made was, for the past few years, it's been this hip hop stuff. And, can we look at some other genres? You know me, not all of your audience knows me. There's not a genre of music that I don't listen to. If it sounds good, I'm going to listen to it. Do I have my favorites? Is there, like you said earlier, hierarchy? Absolutely. But if it sounds good, I'm going to listen to it. But here's the thing. I think I've talked to my own family about. I don't know that dude. I don't really know his work or anything. but that's not even what matters. I think
Right.
one of the comments back to this person was something like, "Well, ticket sales or this, that." And like, I don't know. I don't even know what you're talking about. What I do know is, for as long as I've had football on during football season in my home, I didn't say watched it because I wasn't even really watching it then. There has been a country artist every Sunday. You
Mm-hmm.
can depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on whether or not you think that person has good vocal skills, which is not for me to judge, uh, but if you don't, it's gonna sound really kind of like, I don't know, nails on a blackboard, whatever, you know. Because again, for me, not my favorite genre, not my favorite voice, but every Sunday, I wouldn't think to say, oh, wonder why they don't have, my favorite R&B. Why don't they have an R&B person on every Sunday? But you're listening to someone who you can tell is a football fan,
Yeah.
and it never occurred to them in all these decades
Mm-hmm.
that, I wonder if everybody's enjoying the Sunday night football song. So, me, I hardly ever comment, but when I do, it's very nice and warm and fuzzy. And, I just made the comment like, hey, I hear what you're saying. Um, Not necessarily my first choice for halftime show. And it's kind of like what I've been saying for years about every Sunday having to listen to, you know what I mean, a country artist. I said, but the Monday night football song, I like that one. I crank it up every Monday night if I can. Not because I necessarily like any of the artists, but because it's representative,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you got what I think 80s, maybe early 90s, um, Genesis. Tell me the lead singer of Genesis. Oh no, um, Phil Collins.
Okay.
That was close. Phil Collins' song that he made famous and popular, Genesis made famous and popular, being sung by a country artist who he kills it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't even criticize him. And then a rap by Snoop Dogg, who I believe we mentioned him earlier. And then the percussionist, a lot of people may not know, is actually the wife of Carlos Santana.
Hmm.
If you don't know who Carlos Santana is, just look that up because life's not probably going really well for you. But anyway, so I'm saying all that to say that is a really, to me, the music sounds good, and that's it. I just can't imagine people who are so self centered that it never occurs to them that everyone's not really enjoying hearing that screeching every Sunday night. But, it is what it is. Like, they got to get their money too, so nobody's really mad. But I just think it's a lot of nerve. I think it's borderline hypocritical to then circle back and say the halftime show, which happens actually once a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? At
Mm-hmm.
the end of every football season, not every freaking Sunday or Monday night, and complain about it. Like, what are we doing? Something's wrong.
Well, I think, and I'm sure I've brought this up before, but it's like the N-word controversy. I think so. Every Sunday you have your song played, and because it is maybe the halftime show is the biggest show on the face of the planet when it comes to football. It's like, oh, why can't we have that? I mean, you have everything else, so I don't get why you can't just sit down and just be happy because everybody who has that platform, no one's thinking like, ha ha, we got the halftime show. No one's thinking that, and history has shown for centuries who thinks that way and why they think that way, and everyone else doesn't really ride like that. If you go to Mexico, you're trying to keep all the Mexicans out. If you go to Mexico and they see you, they're not thinking, oh, based on your skin color, this is why I'm going to try and rob you. They're thinking of, oh, this person looks like they're American. This person looks like they have money. That's how I'm going to rob you. If they saw somebody else who was Latino, who looked like they had money, they try and rob them too. So it's just, it's a sad place to be, I think, in America in 2025, just where people are so worried about what other people are getting, what other people are doing, and that really shows what's going on for you. And you should be working harder to make your life better instead of worrying about what other people are saying, minding their own business. So they have the halftime show. Whoop de doo. See if you can get some artists that can come out with better songs that can come up with a halftime show. Because a halftime show is made for pop stars, is made for big artists, big groups. And if you don't have that in a certain genre of music, maybe you should figure out why. I mean, if they had like Luke Combs and Morgan Wallen and Hardy come out and do a show, you probably don't know who half those people are. But if they had that, that might be a good halftime show. I'd probably like that. I'd probably watch that. But I'm not gonna say.
Who are those dudes I like though? Dan and Shay.
Oh yeah,
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 you know
yeah.
about Dan and Shay. Those
Yeah.
are the big homies.
So I mean, it shouldn't matter because a certain genre has it that you just want to, or maybe I think most people they either don't realize it or act like they don't realize that it's really something that has to do with them, with why they don't like this, why they don't like that, and you have to focus more on yourself and figure out why that is, and you'll realize that it's nonsensical because everyone else who is on the other side is not thinking that way. So,
Dude, I will trade you country music and heavy metal, which again, I like country artists, I like heavy metal artists, but if I'm listening to something, those are probably going to be like the last two genres that I'm listening to. But I'll trade you every halftime show if we can have Beyonce or Mariah sing the Sunday Night Football song. I'll trade you that for perpetuity. Like, we don't ever have to go back.
yeah.
Of course, I'm one person. I don't think I could find 10 other people to agree with me to do that. But I'm just saying, how come we can't have a balanced society? Again, getting back to what you said earlier, what is it going to take? I think it's going to take this. I really do. I think it's going to take people looking in the mirror and not being able to stomach what they see because they've decided to align themselves with something so diabolical. Now, my fingers are crossed on that because, back in 1940-ish, something very similar happened with a very different outcome than the one I'm hoping for now. And, we have social media now. We have news feeds that come up seconds after an incident happens and everything. But that could be for good or for worse,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking for this confirmation bias, if you're looking for someone or some entity to tell you that you've been right about all your assumptions all along, just like your parents were, and their parents were, and their parents were, if that's what you're seeking and you're able to find that, then you're really not giving yourself an opportunity to learn something different. You hear families say, well, I don't want my kids to go away to college because I don't want them indoctrinated and coming back home and spewing all this liberal stuff. Or maybe some families say spewing all this conservative stuff, whatever. But see, here's the thing. What I know about post-secondary education, if you're doing it right, not saying everybody is, but if you're doing it right, what you're doing is inspiring people to think for themselves. You're inspiring people to say, that does not sound quite right. I think I'm going to try and find some evidence to the contrary. Now, if you go to post-secondary ed, whatever it is, and you let a professor, a teacher, instructor just spoon feed you information, that's kind of more on you than it is on them. That's not why you're there. But as long as you're indoctrinated and you can follow, just follow information around blindly, you're going to go wherever that information takes you. When you take your blindfold off and take a big stretch and look around and realize how much you have not been exposed to, that's when the real learning starts. And understanding follows learning. It doesn't go the other way around.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. And I think that's a good place to end it. So thank y'all for watching another episode of I Only Ask Because. We will catch you on the next one. Thanks.
Thank you.